Biennale on Air. Welcome to La Biennale on Air, the official monthly podcast of La Biennale di Venezia. In around 30 minutes, we'll take you behind the scenes of our 130-year-old institution, uncovering both well-known and hidden stories. You'll hear from remarkable guests across all our disciplines: art, architecture, cinema, dance, music, theater, and the historical archive. To understand the present, we need to revisit the past. So we'll bring you exclusive gems from the collections of our historical archive. But we're also looking ahead, spotlighting fresh perspectives and new voices. And yes, there will be surprises along the way. The stage, the exhibition space, the cinema screen, and the printed page. This month, we take you closer to the heart of La Biennale, behind closed doors, inside the conversations, and into the moments where the magic happens. We begin with the Biennale Danza 2026, as Bangarra Dance Theatre receives the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement, before entering a festival where time does not exist, through a collection of voices from the artists and protagonists who made chronology loosen its grip. We also stop at the Applied Arts Pavilion at the Biennale Arte 2026, meet a member of the international jury for the upcoming Venice International Film Festival competition, and offer a taste of the new issue of La Biennale di Venezia magazine. Come with us. La Biennale is on air.
As Biennale Danza 2026 enters its final days, the festival continues across venues including the Arsenale, Teatro Malibran, and Parco Albanese in Mestre until the 1st of August. Under the title Time Does Not Exist, Artistic Director Sir Wayne McGregor invites audiences to encounter dance as a living archive, a place where bodies carry memory, identity, and multiple realities. One of the edition's defining moments is the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement awarded to Bangarra Dance Theatre, Australia's leading First Nations performing arts company, the first company and the first First Nations performers to receive the award. For more than 3 decades, Bangarra has brought together dance, music, and poetry to share stories rooted in one of the world's oldest continuing cultures. Here in Venice, the company presented the European premiere of Terrain, a work shaped by land, memory, and ancestral connection. We met Stephen Page and Francis Rings, respectively former and current artistic directors of Bangarra Dance Theatre, to discuss what this recognition means and the powerful message behind Terrain.
This is a really exciting time for the company, especially the time of arts in this country nationally. I think getting a global acknowledgement is extraordinary, let alone being a First Nations arts company. Just being recognized makes you appreciate the amount of work and the energy and the focus that's been driven to sustain Bangarra Dance Theatre today. Previous winners obviously have been Pina Bausch and different individual choreographic visionaries or artists who created contemporary language in the global dance world. So personally for me, when that was acknowledged, I thought there was this wonderful acceptance of the exploration of this crossover of contemporary and tradition. I hear about the global recognition. I understand it celebrates the artistry of contemporary dance. So it took me back to those early alchemist days of Bangarra in a police boys' youth citizen club in Redfern. and how we were exploring this crossover and how we found this beautiful spirit of it becoming one, and how it then led the serpent of stories that were to follow. And then now I look at this pantry of legacy of over 50 works of many different creators who have come through here, where I see where it started, the exploration, and then where I see where it is today and how it's standing strong as a major national performing arts company in Australia. And then for that company then to be now acknowledged in the 21st century from a global foundation of dance recognition is extraordinary.
To be able to be recognised for the important work that Bangarra does globally is incredible. 37 years Bangarra has been telling First Nation stories and using our platform to share those stories from elders, communities and cultural leaders in our productions, shaping a new way in which we express our stories. It's incredible to have this validation that comes from an international organisation that recognises that that impact has rippled across the globe. The work we do, we don't do alone. We do it in collaboration, not only with our First Nations communities and our elders, but the hundreds of alumni, of dancers, of creatives, of cultural consultants, our Bangarra administrative staff, our board, most importantly, the visionary impact of Stephen Page, who elevated the company, who elevated First Nation stories to where we are today. We have our founders, Carol Y. Johnson, Cheryl Stone, and Uncle Robbie Bryant, and our founding dancers. And it is those shoulders that we stand on. We have an impact that continues into the future. Terrain was a work that I choreographed in 2012. For me, the opportunity to tell a First Nations story, I really used that platform to be able to educate non-Indigenous people about our world and our perspectives, understanding better what land means to us. We are a very small part of a much bigger picture, and that connection to country is speaking to us every day. It's telling us information. The natural world is always communicating, and it's that respect and that understanding and it's that knowledge that we want to share with others. To be able to travel internationally and share our First Nation stories is an important opportunity to educate audiences, especially our international audiences, that First Nations people and stories are alive, that they are vibrant and dynamic, that we have a continuous culture that extends back 65,000 years. There's an immense amount of pride that goes along with that, but also a responsibility to the truth-telling, the impact of colonization, and that those things can't be found in the history books. It's not taught in schools. So it's really important that Bangarra give those stories a platform and to be able to share them. When we come together and when we are able to accept this part of our history, we're able to move forward with respect and to be able to heal together. That's important, not only for this generation, but for future generations. We've got to recognise that we have had a dark history, but also we have the power to be able to move forward. And I hope that by telling our stories, we also inspire other First Nations people and communities and artists to be able to tell their stories like Bangarra does. Bangarra is like no other company in the world. We are unique and we are distinctive. We have a process called the creative and cultural life cycle. That means that if we have an idea or a concept for a work, that we reach out to the community and to the elders and leaders of that community to ask permission to tell that story. A part of that process is going to country to introduce ourselves, to explain who we are, what our purpose is, explain our history, and also to explain why we're interested in this story and why it's important to be told. If we're given permission, then we start our research and development. A Bangarra story takes 3 to 4 years to be able to complete, from the first seeking of permission to returning that story back to country, back to community to share with them and the community. It's not just a transaction. It's about building a relationship and having them be a part of our Bangarra songline forevermore. That is a deep responsibility that the company carry. We take our dancers back to that community and they perform, do workshops, go out to country and really have an immersion. But also it's about inspiring the next generation. You never know who's there watching. One young person who is inspired, who wants to choose this as a career pathway. We're really conscious of the impact that Bangarra has in terms of role modelling and also about mentoring as well. Giving back to community, sustaining that relationship means that we have an impact that continues into the future.
We stay with the 20th International Festival of Contemporary Dance with an on-the-ground dispatch from the Biennale Danza 2026. Voices captured in the places where the festival takes shape, among rehearsals, shows, and encounters with the audience. We asked one simple question to some of the artists. How does your work embody time does not exist? We begin with the Finnish magician and visual artist Kali Neo, collaborating for the first time with the Brazilian choreographer Fernando Milo in Tempo, a performance that plays with our perception of time, speeding it up, slowing it down, and finding those rare moments when everything seems to stop.
I feel deeply connected to the theme of the year Time Does Not Exist, as it's something that I have been somehow obsessed with all my life. Starting from Back to the Future films to studying general grammar of film editing and montage, like how in the cinema the past and the present can be cut apart, rearranged, and shown from countless different angles. And this is also something that I've always tried to do on stage performances as well. When we started to create the piece Tempo, I was reading books like the ones by Carlo Rovelli, where I love how he explains the most complex concepts of time with illustrations of smurfs, and I think this is the perfect way, as we are all children when facing something so vast as time. But I also spoke with the professor of space astronomy in Finland and asked him which books about time he would recommend. But instead of scientific books, he suggested me that I should read poetry, since according to him, all scientific writing about time is also kind of fiction. And this is what really intrigues me, is that how theories of time exist in this strange liminal space where science and art meet. I mean, theoretical scientist needs the imagination of a poet to conceive and explain such enormous concepts using our very limited language and equally limited powers of comprehension. And that's why I don't feel that making a dance piece about time is much of a stretch at all. I think art can really shape our understanding of reality and that way maybe even change the world. However, in Tempo, we're not trying to explain or teach, rather to just linger on the subject, and by that hopefully create a moment where the audience could also notice the actual time of the performance and to realize how unique in our society it is to have this kind of shared moment, because there really isn't so many other places in our lives other than theater or performing arts where we really can concentrate on one thing so fully, and in these situations time really feels different.
From there, we move into the landscapes we carry within us with Suara Sfangina, whose Fampita Fampit Fampitan weaves together gestures, memories, and inherited stories, revealing the invisible threads between generations. What is received, what is transformed, and what is passed on.
I would say first that we live in chaotic and uncertain times that call for concrete actions. I believe that art cannot do what politics can do, but any social transformation needs imagination. And I think it requires fantastical powers to open bridges in the present and for us to resist falling into cynicism. So that is what we try to humbly convey with Fampita Fampit Famptan, which is a dance piece bringing together performers from different Afro-descendant diasporas. Fampita Fampit Famptan means comparison, transmission, and rivalry in Malagasy language from Madagascar. So it explores a fractured memory shaped by colonial histories that dispossessed my people of their culture of origin. So through movement, language, and expression, the performers recompose themselves despite the gaps, creating bridges and creating other sensitive ways of relating to one another and to the world. I say that it's a kind of rehearsal for a future that we expect.
Finally, we travel north to Lapon Lost, a work drawing on Sami perspectives to explore loss, resilience, and cultural memory, asking how dance can keep stories alive. Choreographer Hlin Halmastuter tells us more about the piece, created with El Sofsara for the Norwegian National Ballet.
Lapon Lost tells a story that happened long ago, is unfolding today, and will continue to happen in the future. Although it is rooted in the Kautokeino uprising, it speaks to a universal struggle that transcends time and place. Created by Nordic collaborators, the production blends music, costumes, and choreography to create a timeless and deeply resonant experience. I'm a sensitive person and I create from a place of feeling. When I create for or with someone, I want to understand who they are, their essence, their energy. That connection is what inspires me. I can spend hours in the studio exploring movement. I simply love to move, and I still very much feel like a dancer. I think I always will. The passion I have for movement continues to drive me every day. I feel incredibly lucky that this profession has taken me to places I never could have imagined. Along the way, I've met and worked with talented dancers and artists from many different nationalities and backgrounds. Learning from their cultures, perspectives, and ways of moving has been one of the greatest gifts of my career. Being surrounded by people who share the same passion for dance inspires me every day, and I'm grateful to be part of such a creative community.
And now, with one last dance step, we move into the vibrant atmosphere of the 61st International Art Exhibition in Minor Keys, open until the 22nd of November. Our destination is the Applied Arts Pavilion in the Arsenale. Here, the Colombian artist Gala Porras-Kim, whose practice has long engaged with archives, museums, and cultural heritage, invites us into the complex terrain where artifacts, institutions, and classification systems intersect to shape how history is preserved and understood. A real treat for archive enthusiasts like us. Featured in this year's special project, jointly organized by La Biennale di Venezia and the Victoria and Albert Museum, London, Porras-Kim brings together drawings, sculptures, and videos reflecting her research into the dynamics of conservations and the processes through which conservators and curators define the meaning and function of cultural heritage objects. This raises the question, what happens to an object when it enters an archive?
The project here at the Biennale at the Applied Art Pavilion, I was thinking about many different questions that different collecting institutions have. And I have made a lot of works with archives, and I wanted to kind of have an overview of questions that all of these institutions have when they deal with decay in their collection. One of the questions that I'm asking through the works is how the institutional definition of decay is a very singular way of understanding a collection. because many of these materials also have other functions before they came into an archive. And so it's thinking about how to recognize all of the various stakeholders that this material has to also reconcile the historical version of conservation with other types of conservation that the other functions might have. When I think about the objects that had a function for someone in the past that was never supposed to end, for example, many ritual, spiritual materials for like an ancient person in the past that was going to do something forever in their spiritual life, afterlife, but that function never actually stopped. Just because we think it stopped today is not useful for us as that spiritual function, but for that person is still happening. So I think that many of the times the institutional processes are not in conflict with that function either. And so I think both things can actually happen, but it could be a first step to recognize that that material is still functioning for someone else in the past still.
If classification is central to conservation, what other systems are already classifying cultural artifacts?
Even though the objects are already classified in the institution as a historical material, those other classifications already exist. I don't think that we need to really imagine them because they are already existing. It's just finding a way to recognize another point of view of how another entity or being or spiritual being that has a relationship to this material is already classifying it. And so I think that the institution is also a very new container for all of this material. And so we can imagine that after the institution disappears, the same material will return to a different type of classification with the spores or spiritual beings that they're like already going to the museum in their loophole ways.
Our thanks to Gala Porras-Kim for joining us. You can watch the full interview together with other conversations with artists from the Biennale Arte 2026 on our Biennale channel. Don't miss it.
We are officially just over a month away from the start of the 83rd Venice International Film Festival. From September 2nd to the 12th, the Lido will open once again to the world of cinema, with major films, timeless icons, rising stars, and those unexpected cinematic gems we'll be obsessing over for the rest of the year. This year, the international jury for the Venezia 83rd competition will be chaired by the American director, actress, screenwriter, and producer Maggie Gyllenhaal, alongside a stellar group of voices from across the globe. Representing Italy is Francesco Casetti, Sterling Professor of Humanities and Film and Media Studies at Yale, and one of the leading scholars in cinema and media. We sat down with Professor Casetti to ask him a few questions. Professore, welcome. This is your first time serving on the international jury of the Biennale Cinema. What does the festival mean to you? And can you take us back to your very first experience on the Lido?
My relationship with Venice Film Festival is a sort of love story in three stages. The first stage is when I was a student in the 70s. So you can imagine it was a great opportunity to watch movies, new movies. And Venice and Pesaro, the Mostra del Nuovo Cinema, they were the mandatory dates for us at the time. It's a story with cheap hotels, long discussion on the border of the sea, great pleasure in watching new movies, great pleasure in discovering new people, new friends, and also not so much food. There was not so much money for that, but there was a great deal of energy in what we were used to do. The second stage of this love story is 1976. I was a young assistant at the time in the university, just poor, still poor. but still totally enthusiastic. And the director of the Venice Film Festival at the time, Giacomo Gambetti, asked me to organize a conference on Novecento by Bertolucci. I just wrote my first book. It was on Bertolucci, and it was the first book on Bertolucci. And I had the opportunity to watch the premiere, the opening of the movie in Cannes. And it was a fantastic, it was a little bit crazy. The introduction in the conference was by a then famous psychoanalyst, Finzi. And there was a super excited atmosphere. And also, Gambetti asked me to organize a small retrospective on Manuel de Oliveira. And still there is a booklet in the publication of the Biennale that I put together. And the third stage was more important, maybe. At the time, I was already professor, young professor, but already professor. And Pontecorvo asked me in 1995 to organize 3 days of celebration of the anniversary of cinema. And I did something a little bit crazy. The opening was by Robert Zemeckis, sorry. And I was interested, and I asked Zemeckis to speak not as a filmmaker, but also as a philosopher. And he did that, and it was very funny. And the closing speech was by my friend Bernardo Bertolucci, who spoke in such a beautiful and poetic way that I remember people were really touched at the end of this conference. Rarely I've seen a conference with such a density of emotions.
Looking at your extensive catalog of work on film theory and media studies, you have explored some of cinema's biggest questions. What has been occupying your research lately?
One of my scholarly interest is how the machine of cinema works today. And I would say, of course, cinema is no longer the cinema I knew when I was a kid, going to the film theater every Saturday with watching movies. Generally, at the time, I watched first the second part of a movie and then the entire movie. And that was an incredible creative and also fascinating way of watching movie. Today, we watch movies like reading a novel from the beginning. We buy a ticket we buy a ticket for a film theater in the exact moment in which the movie starts. And we have to pay another ticket if we want to watch the movie twice, or we watch a movie at home on DVD or on demand. And this is a third way of watching movie, no longer the classical way, but nor also watching in the film theater today in this literally compressed way. We watch a movie, we can stop, we can go further, we can go back. We can watch a movie like watching a soccer game. Also, just ask to see again a sequence, maybe in slow motion. Everything is possible. It's a new way of watching movie, but I did work on that, and I deeply think that there is a different kind of pleasure, but what we can call the cinematic pleasure is still there. There is something specific of movie. This idea that the reality is coming back, and in the same time I'm losing reality. I'm losing contact with reality. I'm losing contact with the reality because I'm watching a screen, but in the meantime reality is imposing to me. That's something so special, so really fantastic, in a certain sense, so unique, and is a treasure, and I want to keep it.
Thank you so much, Professor. We look forward to seeing you on the Lido from September 2nd.
On the 28th of July, the World Nature Conservation Day reminds us that nature is not a backdrop. It is a living force we are part of. This idea is at the heart of Manuela Infante's interview in Emisferi, Hemispheres, the new issue of La Biennale di Venezia magazine. In it, the Chilean director and playwright revisits Estado Vegetal, a work about plant intelligence and non-human agency, presented at the Biennale Teatro 2019. What happens when theatre begins to think with plants? Here is Manuela Infante, in her own words, on what a plant theatre might be.
A plant theatre to me is simply a theatre that has opened itself to the understanding that reality is a very complex entanglement of human and non-human and extra-human and all kinds of different forces, and that we can't control or describe or understand that entanglement fully. So it's a theater that is kind of in tune with that mystery and with that messiness and with that complexity, and that also leaves space for this entanglement to do its own work, right? So I say a lot that to me I feel that the theater is a thing that has its own agency and it thinks for itself. I think the theater is kind of the way that in which the world thinks or processes itself, you know, and I think that theater is not something that only humans do. I think that many other creatures in this planet have self-reflexive processes that one could call theatrical. So I think the theater is bigger than humans. I think that, so it's not really that we bring the non-humans into the theater, but actually that we acknowledge that theatricality is something that pertains to nature and to the whole complexity of the ecology of this world. So I think the theater is a larger thing than humans. And in that sense, I think my work is really, I understand it as a way of participating in those entanglements, in those bigger entanglements of the world. And in that form of theater that we could call a plant theater, but it's really this whole other creature that I'm describing, I think that their authorship or directing or creating, I don't know, is like, it's more a gesture of listening or of asking, what does this thing want from me more than what do I want from this thing, right?
To read the full interview, you can purchase Emisferi, Hemispheres online via our Biennale store. Grab your copy and slip it into your beach bag. We promise, it is not an ordinary summer read.
And just like that, another episode of La Biennale on Air is in the books. Over the last half hour or so, we've celebrated a historic Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement with Bangarra Dance Theatre, heard from the artists making this year's Biennale Danza unforgettable, stepped inside in minor keys, found out what it's really like to sit on the Venezia 83rd Competition International jury, and flicked through the latest issue of our magazine. Not bad for one podcast episode. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that every corner of La Biennale has its own way of telling stories. art, architecture, archive, cinema, dance, music, and theater, different disciplines, same obsession. Finding new ways of looking at the world. And before you disappear into whatever algorithm has planned for you next, one last thing. The official selection of the 83rd Venice International Film Festival dropped on July 23rd. Head over to our website and keep an eye on our social media channels for all the latest updates as we count down to the mostra. Because summer has a funny habit of disappearing overnight, and before you know it, we'll all be back at the Venezia Lido from September 2nd to the 12th, 2026, queuing for screenings, surviving on espresso and tramezzini, comparing 5-star ratings even before the credits have finished rolling, and confidently declaring just one more film. So, whether you've been listening from the beach, a mountain trail, an airport lounge, a vaporetto, your morning commute, or the office while mentally already on holiday, thanks for spending part of your summer with us. We'll be back soon with more artists, more ideas, more conversations, and plenty more reasons to end up in Venice. Until next time, enjoy the sunshine, don't forget the sunscreen, and save a little room in your calendar for September. This is La Biennale on Air. Catch you later. A big ciao from Venice. La Biennale on Air is a podcast produced by La Biennale di Venezia. The voices you are hearing are those of Maddalena Vallecchi-Williams
and Elia Lotauro.
Mixing and audio editing are by C3 Tecnologie e Organizzazione SRL. The podcast is curated by the Editorial Activities and Web Office and the Press Office of La Biennale di Venezia. Cesare Bisantis, Valentina Campana, Claudia Gioia, Ornella Mugno, and Marta Zannoner.